The screams echoed through the concrete walls of Pelican Bay State Prison, shaking even the toughest guards to their core. A heavy steel door slammed shut in the security housing unit, known as the SHU, where some of America's most dangerous inmates were locked down 23 hours a day. Inside, the cameras caught something no one could explain. A group of officers had gone in to break up a fight, but within minutes, one of them was on the floor, gasping for breath, his radio crackling with static. The rest stood frozen as a chilling silence filled the cell block. One of the guards whispered, "This place, it changes you." That was the moment Pelican Bay guards began to speak out. They had seen things the public would never believe, things that haunted them long after their shifts ended. What really happened inside those windowless cells, and why were some guards suddenly afraid to return to work? Now let's go back to how it all began. Pelican Bay wasn't just another prison. Built in 1989 on the edge of Northern California's Redwood Forest, it was meant to control the most violent inmates in the state. The walls were gray and cold, and the lights never dimmed inside the SHU. The prisoners there were locked in tiny concrete boxes, each with a steel door and no window. Just a slot for food. Most didn't see the sky for years. The guards, too, were prisoners in their own way, trapped in endless tension. Every morning started the same. Officers lined up for roll call, their faces tired, their uniforms pressed but heavy with dread. They joked to ease the tension, but everyone knew that a single mistake could turn deadly. Inside, the inmates communicated through pipes, tapping codes that carried messages across the block. Rival gangs, the Aryan Brotherhood, the Mexican Mafia, and the Black Guerrilla family ruled invisible territories. Even though they couldn't see each other, wars still raged through whispers and notes. One afternoon, a new guard named Allen was assigned to D Block, the most feared part of the SHU. The older officers warned him, "Never look an inmate in the eye for too long. They study you, they wait." But Allen didn't listen. He was young, confident, and thought he could handle it. On his third day, during routine cell inspections, an inmate refused to cuff up. Allen tried to reason with him, his voice calm. Then, without warning, the inmate threw something through the food slot. Allen stumbled back, his eyes burning. It was a mix of urine and bleach. The other guards rushed in, dragging the inmate out, but the damage was done. Allen screamed in pain, clutching his face. As medics carried him away, a senior officer muttered, "Welcome to Pelican Bay." That night, when the lights dimmed and the cell doors clanged shut, the guards sat in silence in the break room. One of them finally said what everyone was thinking. "If the inmates don't break you, this place will." But none of them knew that what was coming next inside D Block would make that day look like nothing. It would be the event that forced the guards to speak out publicly for the first time in the prison's history. Something so shocking it would shake the entire system. The next morning, the air in D Block felt heavier than usual. The guards could sense it. Every sound, the rattle of keys, the buzz of the intercom, felt sharper, louder, almost warning them that something was about to happen. Allen hadn't returned since the attack, and the other officers were jumpy. One of them said quietly, "They're testing us. It's never just one attack." They were right. During the breakfast run, a routine meal delivery turned into chaos. As the metal food slot opened, an inmate slipped out a strip of sharpened metal, so thin it looked like a piece of wire, and sliced the officer's wrist. The tray clattered to the floor, and alarms screamed through the hallway. Guards rushed in, shields up, shouting commands, but inside the cells the inmates were laughing, chanting, banging on their doors in rhythm. The sound was deafening, echoing like a war drum through the concrete walls. When order was finally restored, the warden called for a full lockdown. Nobody moved without orders. No yard time, no showers. just silence. But silence inside Pelican Bay was never peaceful. It was the kind that crawled under your skin and made your heart race. Later that day, 2 guards, Harper and Boyd, were assigned to check a cell that had been causing radio interference. Rumors spread that inmates were using hidden wires to communicate between cells. They didn't know if it was true, but nothing surprised anyone anymore. As they stepped into the dim corridor, their radios hissed and went dead. The cameras flickered for a moment, then went black. Harper looked around nervously. "We lost the feed?" Boyd nodded. "Yeah, just stay close." They reached cell 230. The inmate inside was known for being quiet, never speaking, never causing trouble. But when they slid open the food slot to look in, the cell was empty. The bunk was bare, the toilet dry. It was impossible. No one could have escaped the SHU without being seen. Boyd called it in, his voice trembling, but before anyone could answer, the power shut off completely. The corridor went pitch black. The only sound was the slow dripping of a leaking pipe and the faint echo of footsteps. Someone else was in the hall. Then came the scream. Harper's flashlight hit the floor, rolling in circles. For a brief second, the beam caught something. Bloody handprints smeared on the wall, leading toward the control room door. When the emergency lights finally flickered back on, Boyd was on the floor, shaking. "He was right next to me," he whispered. "Then he was just gone." The incident spread through the prison like wildfire. The official report said it was a system malfunction and inmate confusion. But the guards who were there knew better. Something else was happening inside Pelican Bay, something no one wanted to talk about. That night, several officers met in secret in the staff parking lot. They shared stories they'd been too afraid to tell before, stories about voices through the vents, about inmates talking to people who weren't there, and about missing reports that mysteriously vanished from the system. One of them finally said, "If we don't speak up now, someone's going to die next." And they were right. Because the next morning when the count began, a guard was found inside a locked cell with no sign of how he got there. The morning the guard was found inside the locked cell, Pelican Bay froze. Every hallway was sealed, every door double-checked. No inmate could have done it, at least that's what the officers told themselves. But deep down, everyone knew something wasn't adding up. The guard, Officer Boyd, was discovered sitting against the wall of cell 230, the same one that had been mysteriously empty the night before. His badge was missing and his radio was crushed. He was alive but barely speaking, his eyes wide with terror. The only thing he managed to whisper was, "It wasn't them. It was the system." The warden tried to cover it up immediately. He ordered every camera file from the night erased, calling it a malfunction in security footage. But the guards had already seen too much. Harper, still shaken from the blackout, called an emergency meeting with the few who were brave enough to talk. They gathered in the small break room behind the administration office, away from the cameras. Harper leaned forward, her voice trembling. "They want us to think this place is under control, but we all know it's not. These inmates aren't running the prison anymore. The fear is." One of the senior guards nodded. "You think we're just losing our minds? We're not. This place changes people. You hear voices when no one's around. You see movement in the cameras after lights out. Every time something bad happens, they erase the footage. They don't want the truth getting out." For the first time, the guards decided they couldn't stay silent. One of them had already contacted a local reporter from Crescent City, a small coastal town not far from the prison. The reporter agreed to meet them off-site in a diner, far from Pelican Bay's watchful eyes. That night, 3 guards drove out in silence, headlights cutting through the foggy forest road. They carried copies of reports, photos, and record, things that were supposed to be deleted. One of the papers showed the maintenance logs of D Block with strange handwritten notes beside certain names, notes that weren't written by any of the officers. It was as if someone inside the system had been tracking every move they made. When they arrived at the diner, the reporter was waiting in a booth near the back. She had a small recorder on the table and a notepad ready. "You said this is about Pelican Bay?" she asked softly. Harper nodded. "Yes. You want a real story about crime. This one's going to shake people." They spoke for hours, telling everything: the attacks, the cover-ups, the fear that had infected the guards just as much as the inmates. The reporter promised to publish their story the next morning, but she never got the chance. When she didn't show up at her office the next day, police found her car abandoned on Highway 101, her recorder and notes missing. The guards panicked. They knew they were being watched. One of them got an anonymous message that night: "Stop talking, or next time it won't be a warning." By the end of the week, 2 of the officers requested transfers. One quit without notice, and Harper, who had started it all, was placed on medical leave after collapsing during a night shift. The official statement from the Department of Corrections simply read, "Routine staff adjustments." But the truth never disappeared. A month later, an envelope with no return address arrived at a small local news station. Inside were photocopies of the missing reports and a single note that read, "Pelican Bay isn't just a prison, it's a secret." The story finally aired under the title "Pelican Bay Prison Guards Speak Out Inside the World's Toughest Cell Blocks." It shocked the nation. The public demanded answers, but officials denied everything. To this day, no one knows who leaked the files or what really happened. Pen to the guards who spoke out, and deep inside the SHQ where the lights never go out, a single message was found scratched into the wall of cell 2. "The walls remember.